Thank you for joining us for our continued programming as part of our FSCA online learning experience. My name is Jeff Peterson, the Executive Director of FSCA. Our next presentation is one of our virtual workshops entitled Digital Decorating, Where Does It Fit and Where Is It Going? We have a great panel today with diverse backgrounds in the digital decorating area. Chris Yardley is President of Panther, a digital print and embellishment provider in Toronto, Canada. Rick Salinas, Vice President of Marketing for Duplo USA, supplies both digital coating and foil transfer equipment, and Myron Werner, Director of Sales, Packaging, and Printing for KURZ Transfer Products, who provides both foils and machinery for digital decoration. I want to welcome all of our panelists today, and we are going to dive right into some very specific questions, and we'll have some discussion as we go along as well. Although this program is pre-recorded, please feel free to send me emails at jeff@fsca.com, and I'll be glad to pass on appropriate questions to our panel members. So Chris, Rick, and Myron, thanks for joining us. Again, I think we'll dive right into some questions and then have conversation as we go along. The first one that we have put together here is, what applications are the best fit that you see out there using either digital spot, raised coatings, or digital foils? What are some of the applications you've seen and that you feel are really good fits? Chris, I think I'll start with you. What have you seen out there with customers and so forth you've worked with where this really seems to, the applications seem to fit well?
Well, I think the best fit is small run packaging and business cards or brochures and books. I mean, really any kind of marketing material, direct mail. It can be really adapted to anything, but small run packaging is kind of a nice niche market to get into, and it works so well in this environment.
Great. Do you and have you seen that both? That's been reflected in both coatings and foils that both fit well for packaging or direct mail, or either or both?
Yeah, I think both. Absolutely. It's just the whole embellishment, the touch and feel thing. I think they're both still really strong. And nowadays, I don't know, I don't see too much small run packaging anymore that doesn't have some kind of raised coating or foil. Pretty much the mainstay now.
Yeah, there's a lot that's being done out there, and I actually do believe that some of the work being done digitally has sparked more use for it, and sometimes has sparked applications, larger applications that may not fit digital, but they might have started in that area and grew into something larger. So I think that's been a good thing for everybody involved in embellishments. Rick, I'm going to ask you the same questions. What, as you're out there and you're seeing the digital work being done, what types of applications are you seeing? Where do you think it's been the best fit?
Yeah, kind of when we've got people, especially printers or trade binderies looking at this type of equipment, we've been really pushing our sales reps to ask this exact question to see where this equipment going and what type of applications. And what's kind of interesting is it seems like it's become hugely popular for first-time customer engagement. What I mean is when customers don't have brand recognition and they're trying to engage people. A perfect example of this is the marijuana industry. There is no name brand, there's no Marlboro of the pot industry. So when people walk into these dispensaries, they just see a wall full of different items. So you have to have something that engages people. That's why they use foils, they use soft touch, they use raise, anything they can to try to catch that customer's eye. So I think first-time customer engagement is a really big thing because you got to try to stand out from the crowd. I think that's why we see it so big in the book industry as well. When you go into a bookstore, if you notice, they use embossing, debossing, soft touch, foils now. Some of these covers are like works of art, but it's that whole thing of you got to try to get somebody to pick up your book. So it's trying to get that little tiny edge when you don't have that brand recognition.
Yeah, and the example I've used for a long time, because I've been in this industry a long time, maybe not as long as Myron, joke, but I've always used the example, Rick, that is wine labels. That industry learned a long time ago, and there's, of course, studies out there that people that come in to buy wine, like 10% know exactly what they're going to buy. The other 90% do not. So, same type of situation where so much of the wine labels are, have some type of a foil decoration, embossing, coating. So yeah, that all fits in that same.
Especially in the wine industry, I think when you put those foils or the water droplets or things like that, you're trying to create that perceived value, right? When you're selling a bottle of wine for $20, it's sitting next to a bottle that's $8. Why does somebody buy the $20 bottle? It's usually because that label has created a perceived value.
Exactly. Myron, I'll throw the same question to you. As you're out there seeing people, this, and again, we're going to talk about more of this. When we talk about digital decorating, we really have two types we're discussing. The type like that Chris is involved in is using digital inkjet technology and a polymer base for the digital foil. There's also the toner-based technology, and Myron's foils has equipment in that area. But I think the question goes to you, Myron. What type of applications are you seeing from the digital side as you're talking or seeing customers?
Well, the points of differentiation that Chris and Rick both mentioned are, sometimes, can be accomplished, those points of differentiation with, our traditional analog technologies of stamping and embossing. So I think the benefits of digital, the one thing everybody goes to immediately is you got variable data or variable print possibilities. I don't know that drives all the volume, but it certainly adds to the benefits of these processes. The places we've seen it really successful is online printers, photo cards, invitations, small business marketing. These are all areas where a lot of people have really excelled with these technologies. And it's really, the benefits of the digital foiling and spot coatings are really the benefits of quick speed to market, no changeover time, really perfect for continuously changing jobs or maybe a brand, as Chris mentioned, small run packaging that, a brand of wines that has a Merlot and a Chardonnay, and you're changing out, historically you'd be changing out tooling. Here you can do it just with files or flavors of a product, or a shampoo range or something like that you can do in really no downtime for changeovers, no tooling needed. And you have the ability to run a combination of different jobs all in one production run without those changeovers. And that's really the areas where I think there's really a big advantage for the digital technologies.
Great, thanks. Let's move on to another question here. When are digital coatings or foils the right choice? It kind of falls into the same thing, and I think, Myron, you're kind of alluding to that. But I think the question is, and Chris, I remember us having a discussion at possibly one of our conferences on this, that even a job I know you were working on where part of it was digital, but you realized that another part of the job actually needed to be done more conventionally with like foil stamping. So as you're looking at jobs and so forth, what types of situations or that you look at a job and say that it's definitely the right one for digital and foils? What are the criteria that meets that?
Well, I mean, I think, logically right off the start, it's how the length of the run. If it's a super long run, I don't think digital is the choice. And also size restriction. The image itself or the piece that you're printing itself it's a really super intricate. I think I can get a better result with traditional foil. Also, like a substrate can play a part. Like if I'm using a really laid or textured stock, it could be better suited for a traditional or an uncoated stock. And I guess also thickness of the stock, because sometimes there is a limitation on the on my equipment on the thickness. So I think it's just you look at the job and you suss it out. But I have married the two many times where I have done part of it with a traditional foil and gone back and maybe put a spot UV on top, things like that. And I did learn a lesson. You're right. When we had our chat last time, I took a run that was way too large for us, and I mean it was right out of the gate. So we were still learning, but I ended up pulling it and doing partial traditional and partial digital. But the digital, of course, jumps out at you when you want to personalize it or when you have a lot of changes to the files. That's when it's great, because once you get a die traditional, you've got your die. So
right.
we look at the overall job and say, how are we going to handle this? What's our timing? I mean, if we have a client that we just inventory covers, for instance, for their annual reports, we can, run them on the digital machine when we have a bit of downtime. We can do larger runs, but usually, it was due yesterday, so we don't really have that choice. But, we usually just take the job and figure it out. But if I have a really intricate piece of artwork or a really intricate design, I usually go traditional.
And certainly, if you have somebody that's interested in embossing, it may, embossing or embossing with foil, then it may make more sense for traditional. Although, as we know, and you would point out that you can get that embossed look, at least at a single level embossed look, by putting down the digital inkjet polymer and then applying the foil on top. You actually can get that embossed look, which is another benefit for digital, especially for shorter run type work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it does mimic it really well, but it just depends on the overall look. Probably those stock is one of the bigger things we run up against, and they're coming out with great mimicking again uncoated stock or a more laid texture all the time, but it's still not the same as like a felt or that kind of thing.
Right. Rick, same question to you. When are you seeing that, with that, digital is the right choice, or, where is that differentiation between potentially using a different foil technology? That could be hot stamping. We haven't even brought up that, cold foil is another way of, applying the foil. So, where do you see those lines being drawn when you're talking to customers?
Yeah, I think she expressed most of the points. The only thing I'd mention is it seems like everybody's trying to one up each other on the way to do things. So everybody's experimenting with a lot of the things. So sometimes it works well, sometimes it works very poorly. And I think in some of these instances, people have been trying to automate these processes. When you talk about going digital, eliminating touch points. But when you're getting into the embellishments, it's becoming almost an art form that sometimes the steps are getting more and more and more, because they're trying to lay down, people try to do soft touch via a liquid coating, and it's very difficult because people have gotten so used to the quality of the laminate soft touches that trying to do it with a liquid is very difficult to achieve that same finish. So obviously quantities are very important. Variable data, where does it play into the embellishment side of it? Are they embellishing, the variable data? So I think that line is blurring constantly depending on what is trying to be achieved. And because of the margins that are achieved, sometimes cost doesn't matter as much, because the prices you see people charging for some of these embellished pieces are crazy. So
and a lot of times, and I think, Rick, too, I think you're touching on a point that a lot of times some of the decorating that's being done for specific products is higher end type things, potentially luxury related. Certainly you mentioned cannabis, but where you're right, the cost of the packaging isn't a major concern. Unlike, a consumer toothpaste or something where they look at every penny because there's millions and millions of being, out there and the price point of the product is so low. But, a lot of these types of things, you're right, the price point's high enough that the packaging cost isn't a major concern.
Right.
You also had mentioned that, and I've seen some really cool pieces where they've put down like a soft touch laminate. And I know Chris has worked with this, and you probably, where you can put down a soft touch laminate and then come back with like a raised, coating spot. Maybe the laminate's sort of a matte, flat, soft touch, which it usually is, and then come back with a gloss raised UV over the top that provides some really cool things, or even a raised foil, digital foil over the soft touch laminate. Create some really nice pieces. Again, Myron, anything that you would want to add to that on, where you see, digital? Okay, yes, definitely this is an application for digital versus going more conventional or maybe even cold foil.
I think the substrate and the print process are critical components to that. I think Chris had alluded to that earlier. And there are a lot of different digital technologies and equipment out there. So making, the right, knowing what the substrate's going to be and what the process is going to be, the print process makes a big difference on, if it's right for digital or not. And, as I mentioned, there's various different machines and equipment out there. So we've got, as an example, our toner-based Lux liner system would work on dry stocks very effectively. In fact, the foil embellishment kind of takes on the contour of some of those unique substrates. In other cases, though, we would have extreme difficulties with our inkjet type systems working on some of those dry stocks. So the equipment you have and the substrate you have and how those all work together are critical to selecting digital or more traditional processing methods.
So Myron, from using a toner-based adhesive, usually the stock, a drier stock or uncoated stock doesn't cause problems with foil adhesion with that, where there can be some challenges with the inkjet. Is that what you guys see?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, these technologies are all a little bit different and changing. So, and they'll continue to advance. In our inkjet system, what we refer to as our jet liner, we have patented a process in that we're applying the adhesive to the back of the foil instead of onto the substrate, which allows us to get to many different substrates that traditionally you wouldn't be able to do with inkjetting an adhesive down onto a dry stock where it wicks into the paper before you can get a good transfer. So that's an example of how technologies are changing, and everybody out there that's engaged in this are developing new techniques and technologies that will change fast because of the digital drivers behind this equipment. So there's some unique applications, unique equipment that will be delivered. And so when you're answering this question, when are digital coatings or foils the right choice, substrate's a critical component. And then also, what type of equipment and what your equipment's capable of doing with those substrates. They have to marry together properly.
Great. Okay, let's move on to this next question. What are some of the advantages digital coatings and foils, both inkjet, polymer or toner-based adhesives, applications? What are the big advantages? We've kind of talked about it, but what are some additional ones that it really brings over other types of embellishment techniques? Rick, I might start with you this time. What do you see as the big advantage out there for digital and using it as an embellishment, using the embellishment techniques with digital?
Well, probably the two most obvious is how fast you can do it. Being able to create it through a digital file. Many times you can be creating the piece within minutes of it arriving on a shop, especially if you have an automated workflow. Our spot UV coder, as an example, we work very closely with EFI with their job flow. So we can take that fifth color file right out of the file. When they send it to the press, the fifth color file for the polymer goes straight to our machine. So instantly, as it comes off the digital press, it goes into our machine, reads the 2D barcode, and sends the digital spot layer file right to the machine. No user intervention at all. I mean, that's what the digital advantage gives you, to be able to do that. On the file side, some of these sleeking devices, we have a device that's less than $20,000 for being able to, apply foil. So there's huge cost advantages, and then you have the labor savings of being able to automate the process through the workflows. So you gain a lot of advantages, especially on the short run. I think eventually when those quantities get higher, that advantage dissipates quickly. But definitely for the short run, it plays a huge advantage.
And, I think we've kind of touched on it, but I think, one of the great things about some of the digital, and then especially I think some of your type of equipment, Rick, is that, it may start out as, a shorter run, and then, it may turn into something larger that does need to go to something more conventional. But that's how it begins. Utilizing the embellishment starts with something smaller and may grow into something bigger. Quick question, Rick, for you, as you kind of meant, your foil type unit that you have, I know is separate from your spot UV. Now, can that be utilized with both a polymer or a toner-based type adhesive, or is it more for the polymer that goes, that's applied on your spot coating machine?
That's an excellent question. It can be used for both. So, and that's based on the foil, the adhesive that's added to the foil. So we have foils that are specifically made to stick to toner and foils that are made to stick to polymer. So that's a good question, because it's an important point.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes.
So,
but they both could be used on the same foil unit, correct? The foil equipment.
Correct.
Okay.
But to give you a point of where you talked about, you always got to show the disadvantages too. The one disadvantage you have from sleeking, especially if somebody's doing a higher end piece, let's say something on a solid white background. Well, most people know this, some might not. Most digital devices actually spray a tiny little bit of polymer of toner onto the sheet as a anti-counterfeiting measure. The problem with sleeking is sleeking sticks to toner. It doesn't care where it was supposed to be and where it wasn't supposed to be. So, we will see some complaints at times, that people are saying, oh, I'm seeing little specks of foil scattered across the sheet. And then it's because they don't understand that, that's inherently built in to a lot of the digital presses. Some digital presses, you can turn off that feature, but some you can't. So that definitely has to be taken into account when somebody is designing a piece or what they're trying to produce.
Interesting. Of course, you're falling ahead, because the next one's about limitations. So yeah. You beat me to it, Rick. That's no problem. Myron, I'll go to you. Again, we've kind of touched on this, and I know you're involved with a lot of different types of digital, including some newer innovations. But what are the big advantages of, you have, I know you're involved with both inkjet and toner-based applications.
Yeah, for sure. So we're engaged in all of that, and and certainly are making different foils for those applications as well, as Rick had mentioned. You know, the advantages are, you know, some of the things we talked about earlier, but, you know, the spot varnishing in combination with foiling just really stands out. You know, I think you can still accomplish some of those looks in traditional methods, but the advantages of the digital world are some of the things Rick mentioned, including the ease to change digital files and, you know, feed your equipment with those digital files. So you don't have the tooling, you don't have to order the tools, you don't have to produce the tools, you don't have to pay for them. So this is all speed to market, and it really allows you to run very high-end work at very small volumes. I mean, you could do one piece and accomplish a lot through a digital format that you certainly couldn't do with traditional methods. So that's the biggest advantage that you see, I think. And I had mentioned earlier, you know, some of the benefits of and marriage of what type of equipment you have and what you're trying to accomplish is really critical too. You know, again, some of the advantages of maybe small run packaging would be the ability to change those images or colors on a series or brand of items is really a critical advantage. And then just the fast setup, fast turnaround. It's really digital customization makes it easy to make those changes versus traditional methods.
One thing, Myron, too, you know, the toner, like your digital metal line, it's set up, you know, it's more of a toner-based adhesive, and then it makes it fairly easy to go back and do four-color process digital printing over the top. Is that correct?
Exactly. That was the next point I was going to make. So thank you for that, Jeff. Yeah, so putting the foil down first, and again, your process, your setup, your print process all makes a difference. So being able to foil in advance of printing provides all kinds of different design possibilities, including you don't need so many specialty foils and colors and you know, foils that require MOQs and large order quantities and higher cost. You can avoid that by utilizing silver, creating your own color palette by overprinting, creating vignettes on foil and vignettes of foil. And overprinting creates all kinds of creative design possibilities that maybe you couldn't do with traditional stamping methods. So it opens up a whole new design possibility by being able to overprint and create your own colors.
Great. Chris, anything further on that as advantages, you know, that you really see with, you know, having digital coating and foils? You know, what do you look at as the big advantage that, you know, that you can sell?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered it all, but I mean, to summarize, I mean, I like to use it for proofing a job. Even if I'm going to produce it traditionally, I can get, you know, the overall impact of the piece that I'm designing before I put it on a major production run. But I think just figuring out what works in a digital workspace, you know, low volume items, variable consideration, things like that. And really the only limitations for me is the stock choice or the physical size of the job or the length of the run. Otherwise, there's overlap all the time between digital and traditional, from my standpoint anyway. So I think we've pretty much covered all of it. You know, it's really down to, though, the stock choice, the size of the job, and the length of the run at the end of the day.
Great. Now, you know, kind of back, and Rick started on that. We know that this type of thing, you know, the digital isn't for everything. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, and you know, I certainly, you know, before we've been dealing with this pandemic, you know, I think we were, you know, from a lot of different ways, we were doing really well as an industry because, you know, I think there's these applications for digital. We're talking about short runs, doesn't fit everything. So conventional foil stamping, embossing, comes into play. You know, possibly there's a lot of large coverage, long runs that may need to be overprinted. Well, guess what? Cold foil is going to fit the best. We have a lot of decorating techniques right now that are out there, you know, and digital fits you know, certain ones. But I just want to touch on some of those limitations. So, you know, hey, when people are looking at this, where does it fit? But, you know, there's some great fits, but when doesn't? We have touched on it, but Myron, what do you see as some, you know, some definite limitations of the digital process, you know, that maybe even want to be aware of, or our attendees want to be aware of?
Well, I think there's some the substrate limitations we talked about earlier, but again, everybody's kind of attacking new methods to utilize to transfer both spot varnishes and metallic decorations. So it's what you want to accomplish, and it's also key that you understand some of the equipment, the capabilities that are in the market, and what they can and cannot do as you get into this. So there's like in our portfolio you mentioned earlier, we have the DM liner, which is a toner-based technology. You can do a lot pre-press and overprint with that type of technology. You've got the Scodex and MGI type technologies, depending on the machine and the equipment. Some of that is a hot foil release technology. Some of that you're printing an adhesive and transferring it more in a cold foil type methodology. And it's critical that you understand those methods and what's possible on what type of substrates. And if you can, if this is all going to be a post-press, post-print decoration, or a pre-press, pre-print type decoration, and then the design possibilities of all of those things coming together. So, all of those different techniques and equipment have some limitations, but they're not all the same limitations. So it's important to understand what you can do with what type of decoration, and then what type of consumables that you need for that equipment. So obviously then you're getting into the cost analysis and the throughput analysis, and how many times do you need to run that job through a certain piece of equipment? Can you spot varnish and raise varnish and foil and transfer that all in one pass, or is that multiple passes? As an example, the Steinem and D-Max machine that was developed for spot UV coating, and we've now added a D foil unit to that, a digital foil unit, which is more of a hot foil process, but we're marrying to those systems. In that machine, you're able to do much different levels, say a 10 micron varnish, a 20 micron varnish, and a 30 micron varnish, all at different levels, and foil in the same pass. Whereas other equipment, you may have to run that through a piece of equipment multiple times to be able to get that different levels of tooling, or different levels of texture. So I think that's, to understand the limitations, or what are the limitations. They differ depending on the process and the equipment that you have or you're looking to purchase.
And I think, Myron, of course, you guys are very involved from the foil side. That I think you made a good point, and I think a lot of people listening will, know the MGI, know the Scodex, and certainly some of the, the Duplo, that machine that can do the digital inkjet type of, application. But the foil side is different with those machines. It's digital, it's all inkjet related, but they need to be aware that there's different foils. I know, that all of them have a little different way that they're applying the foil on their digital machines. So it's important to ask those questions from the foil side too.
Correct, absolutely. So we've got different foil technologies for all of those different applications and equipment out in the marketplace. They're all a little bit unique. Some are very similar, but there's definitely both, hot foil release technology as well as a cold foil type release and compatibility with the adhesives that are in the market and the inkjet adhesives. All of that's all a little bit different than some of the more traditional adhesives, or what you might see in an offset press adhesive cold foil process. It's quite a bit different than what you're seeing in these digital machines.
Chris, you've mentioned some of the limitations or what you look at, and a lot of times it's the size of the run, sheet size certainly. Make it, those are limitations you look at is that fit what you do, for, digital embellishment. Anything else that you'd want to add that you look at is that it may not be as good a fit for digital versus another embellishment technique?
Well, probably I think I mentioned the intricacy of the design. If it's a really fine design, sometimes I just can't hit it with the digital. But and we do say that the length of the run or this or that. But then now there is the jet varnish 3D web, right, for labels and stuff. Well, it's been out for a while now. I mean, that can obviously do larger runs and for the label market, for wine labels, that kind of thing. So the length of the run is not becoming as much of an issue anymore because they are making up for speed on these machines. But probably intricacy of the print design is probably one that really can't be resolved in any other way but traditional. Because I mean the foil is sitting on top of the varnish, right? So there's a limit.
Right. Rick, anything else on that as far as limitations? You talked a little bit about the toner potential,
right.
Situation. Other limitations you see out there?
A couple of points I'd like to just with people that they need to consider. One is, offset presses are offset presses when you do things, that way to create your base layer, let's say. But digital presses are made very different ways. You have wax-based toners and things like that you have to consider, especially when you're getting into, raised UV and polymers. You have to consider things like dyne levels of the paper on how that polymer is gonna sit on top of there. So those are kind of important things. Even when you're done with the piece, you've just created these, this stack of beautiful raised UV covers that have been embossed. People don't even consider, well, what now? You just can't pick up that stack and walk over to a guillotine cutter that's got raised spot UV on the right side of the sheet and none on the left, and now you've got a waterfall of paper that's going to get crushed, that you're going to crush the polymer when you put it into your guillotine cutter. So, we've seen a huge explosion in the popularity of our slitter cutter creasers just for being able to finish that type of work, because there's no other way to do it unless you cut little tiny stacks, and it creates a whole different work problem. Probably the other thing too. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris.
That is true. I mean, finishing is so important. Like, you can't just cut your business cards on the guillotine. And small run packaging, one of the machines that we're just about to get, actually, that I'm so excited about is the Duplo 400, because we can do our own die cutting for small runs in house. That's a brilliant machine if you're a digital shop with foil and varnish, because the piece goes through and the varnish doesn't get scratched. It's brilliant. So one of the things that, and I guess this is going to kind of flow into the next question, what do you have to know before you get into this market? Finishing is a huge part of it, and you can't just do your finishing in a traditional way anymore.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Chris. And you said the digital die cutter, is that something that's done like a rotary die cutter, or how's that?
No, the DPC 400 that she's mentioning is like our plotter cutter. So it's plotting out and cutting it out that way, and that's how you have to do some of these pieces when you get that intricate, and it can do the specialty shapes and things.
Right.
So
because you can't And the reason is that if you have a lot of that spot UV, you just can't have a large stack of sheets on top of each other because, as you said, it'll smash that raised polymer UV.
Exactly.
Correct? Yeah. That's very interesting. Great. Excellent. Let's move on. And again, Chris, I think, I might let you continue on with this question. What should someone know if they're looking at adding digital coating or digital foil? From an FSCA standpoint, we have members that are involved with a lot of different things. Chris has a full digital printing shop that has embellishments to some of our finishers who in the past have done mostly just conventional, but we've had several of our FSCA members who have invested in some of these digital technologies as well. So others that are looking at it, what are the types of things, that they should be considering or looking at if they're going to add this equipment?
Well, I mean, I think, logically you should have a knowledge of the machine that you're looking at, because they all have limitations and some work better than others. And, your environment too. I mean, I think it's very difficult for a large shop to put a digital, a smaller digital profile within their shop, because the environment has to be so clean and so perfectly controlled for digital foil and varnish to really work well. And also to know that, you're going to have some machines work better with some substrates than others. And even the foils, like not all foils are created equal. You've got to learn all that. And your operator, it's not pushing a green button. They make you think it's pushing a green button, but it truly isn't. The skill level of our operators makes such a difference. And that includes pre-press. I mean, you have to have a really solid pre-press that can get that file prep done, that, has that eye for it. So, skill level of your operators, skill level of your pre-press, those are critical factors. But, I think one of the bigger ones is the environment. It has to be a very controlled environment. You can't stick, an MGI machine in the middle of a litho shop with, it has to be a very clean and orderly environment for this to work. And I think that's a big part of it.
I think that's a great point, Chris. One of our members is close to where we're at here, where our FSCA headquarters is Post Press Specialties in Kansas City, and they're a large finishing shop with all kinds of more conventional finishing and bindery equipment. Well, they invested in the MGI a little while back, and they created a whole separate room that's glassed in. It's a regular shop, but then right in one corner is this whole separate room that's all glassed and confined, for that type of work. As you're right, it has to be. It can't be put in like a regular die cutter or foil stamper or folder gluer. Some of those things have to definitely be kept in mind. That's different, especially for our finishers who may be looking at it. They have to make sure they have an environment they can put it in.
And also the end part. You have to have the finishing equipment to finish the digital sheets. I mean, you have to have a die cutter that will respect the foil and varnish. You have to be able to die cut your business cards. I mean, I'm going towards Duplo here, but we have all the Duplo stuff. So, business cards trimmed on the Duplo, brilliant. Postcards, invites. We had to invest in all that equipment because we used to do everything traditionally. We used to cut on the guillotine, do all that. So you really need that backup production ability to really make it work.
Great. Rick, anything you want to add to that as somebody who's looking into adding digital?
No, I think Chris has hit it on the head. The problem is, people see, okay, I'm hearing that this embellishment, has excellent margins and that I can make a ton of money on this. But then, so they look at the big shiny, our DDC A10 or an MGI or a Scodex or whatever, and don't look at the entire workflow. And I've seen probably the people who failed, when I've seen people fail at this, it's because they haven't done that. You know, they see the shiny penny in the corner and they run to pick it up without thinking of everything else, all the dollars that they're running right past while they go to get that shiny penny. You have to look at your workflow and what you're trying to accomplish. So, you know, sometimes it might be better to start with the finishing piece, get that part of it understood, and work your way backwards. So you got to look at the whole picture of what you're trying to do, and including workflow. Is there a workflow solution that can help and eliminate some of these steps, or take it from print, you know, to embellish to finishing much easier than what you're doing? So I think people getting a better understanding of their workflow is first, and then what you're trying to achieve by adding this embellishment. Is spot UV where you should start? Is foil where you should start? Is it hot foil? Is it cold foil? Do you want to do it in line with your erase spot UV? You know, because then you take into things that you got to understand. You got to understand corona treatments, pinning lamps. There's a big learning curve on that type of stuff. It all looks easy at the show, but as Chris mentioned, there's learning that has to be done there.
Great points, Myron. Anything else on you know, what somebody should know before they would invest on the digital decorating situation?
Well, I think Rick hit some critical points. You really have to understand the entire process and you know, what equipments and technologies marry well with additional embellishment technologies. You know, so there's different digital presses out there with different ink systems and processes. I think Rick mentioned oil-based earlier, toner-based systems. You know, are you you know, what are you really trying to accomplish through that whole process? And the design possibilities are much different as well than traditional print methodologies. So that changes. So the skill set of your pre-press people and understanding of what you're doing to get that proper workflow is all critical. And, you know, so we're working on, when you think about different, you know, processes, you know, we have one of our jetliners, our jetliner capable of being installed in line with a HP Indigo 6900 for roll-to-roll processes, where you can really get great throughput, and it's actually in line, going right through our machine and fed directly into an Indigo. So it's a pre-decoration. You know, our DM liner, Lux liner, is set up to, you know, out of say an HP 12,000 sheet fed. After printing, you can go directly into it, and then you can go back and overprint again and re-register into that machine. So those are examples of workflows that I'm familiar with, and there's others out there. And then, you know, you talk about the spot varnish and embellishments in combination with oiling in the same pass. I think it's critical to understand what you can accomplish in one pass, or how many passes it's going to require you. To Rick's point about chasing that penny, you know, if you think you're just going to get these units and do some of these really exotic, beautiful pieces all in one pass, and it's all going to be flawless, you really need to understand what the capabilities are and what the consumables are that you need to make sure that whole process works effectively.
Great, thanks. I think this is our last question. What recommendations do you have to help market and sell digital decorating? You know, I'll make the comment that, you know, I've seen some of our members invest in this, and you know, and I've seen some that are being extremely successful, and then there's others that are still kind of struggling through to find the right markets and so forth. Chris, this might, you know, be directed at you quite a bit, because I feel like you know, Print Panther has been very successful in marketing what you do with your digital decorating processes. You know, what would you recommend, or some of the things that you do that you think that's been successful in marketing digital coatings and digital foils?
Well, I mean, I used to say that I would show the client, you know, the printed piece with a coating and without, but I mean, that's 3.5 years ago. And so today, what do? I mean, really today, very few people want print without some kind of added value, without some kind of embellishment. I mean, I truly believe that most of my clients, and they cross all boundaries from real estate to pharmaceutical, they want that embellished sheet. They want that extra, punch to their marketing materials, especially after coming out of what we're coming out of now with this, COVID situation. If you're going to invest money in printing something, you want it to be pretty spectacular. So I don't actually have to sell the MGI anymore. The MGI is almost a given. And I thought the whole world knew that, but I was shocked because we recently done a partnership with franchise print shops that are more traditional print. And, there is definitely a knowledge gap on what's achievable. So when I don't have to sell the embellishment, but I have to sell the limitations. And I don't want that to sound negative because it's not meant to. But, it's just really educating your client. You're going to get a better result if you do this. And I don't think you can just be a printer anymore, picking up your job, printing it, delivering it. You have to have added value, whether that's I can make this better, I can do this better. You have to have that. And right now, I believe that print is going to be more valuable coming out of all this because it is something that's trusted. It is something that can't change like digital, information can. So I think we have to seize on that opportunity as printers and say, we are going to deliver 101%. It's always going to be better than 100%. It's always going to be one step up. So I don't have to show my client a non-varnished piece and a varnished piece anymore. They know what they want. They want that extra zing. And, I think we're down the road on that one. We don't have to spoon feed anymore. People know what they want.
Chris, do you, when you're talking to a client, and as you said, a lot of them, today want to have that extra, embellished look. Do you guys come up with what you recommend and come up with the ideas on what should be done with a piece like that? Or does that come from the client? What percentage, is it both? How does that usually work?
Well, it is both, but I would say 80% of the time, people ask me, what should I do with this piece? And I will say, I think it will work really well with this, because one thing people forget is if you put a foil down on a wonderful piece of artwork, it's an opaque foil. You're going to lose detail, and they don't see that. They think that they're going to get a lot of that detail coming through. So you have to remind them that a foil is an opaque material you're putting down on that image. So, less is more a lot of the time, like just use the foil, with a soft hand, with a light hand. So, but most of the time when people come to us, they want our input. They might think they want their logo in gold foil, but, they haven't thought it through completely. So, but, that's another way to lock in the client. Once you get their marketing materials the way they want it, you've got their color perfected, you've got the foil they want, you've got the look they want, then they come back to you because you've kind of locked them into you, right? They can't just go down the street or, order off online printer and get what they want. Suddenly they have to come to you because you give them that extra thing. Now online, there are some more commodity kind of shops that are supplying it, but oftentimes they'll only have silver foil or they only have a spot and you are limited to what you can do. Well, we have no limitations. We create magic and we always push the boundaries. So, that's how I sell it. I always sell that we can do it, even if I'm not even sure if we can. We usually figure it out, right?
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's a key point. And as I said at the beginning of this question, I've seen some of our members or some of the people that have gotten involved in the digital, that it's been more of a struggle, and others who have just done great with it, really like yourself, Chris. And I think the key is that you really need somebody, if it's on staff, or you need somebody that has that feeling and ideas on what should be done and how to do it, and have the ideas on what will look the best. And if you don't have that type of person or ability, it makes it's going to be more of a struggle. I think I think that's an important part of it, and I think that's great how you're able to do that with your clients. Rick, I'll ask you maybe from the standpoint of of you know, some of the customers and clients you work with on how they're marketing it? How are they marketing their digital decorating, or some of the things you've seen?
No, I think Chris touched on it. The one statement she said is what I had on the tip of my tongue. That sometimes takes people a little bit of time to understand is less is more. Some, you know, people get carried away with the embellishment sometimes, and you almost lose the effect because you know they've gone so overboard with it. So learning that balance is important. And probably the one neatest thing I've seen a couple of customers who have some of our devices do is when they talk to a customer about, you know, embellishment, and the customer decide, you know, no, that wasn't really what I really want to do, because this stuff is done digital and it's so easy. Sometimes they'll in the box on top of their job, they'll send 5 or 10 samples that they just did an embellishment and say, hey, you know, we talked about this. We just wanted you to see what it would look like. And you know, talking to them, sometimes upwards of 50 to 60% of the time, the next time that job comes, they go with the embellishment because it just wowed them so much. So sometimes showing people what's possible with their own piece is the best selling feature, even better than samples. But samples. We create samples constantly. My marketing team is constantly looking at, you know, at what our customers are doing and what people are doing with our distributors around the world on to create different types of samples, different leather looks, things like that, to show people what's possible.
Yeah, I think that is the key. And Chris, I know you do a lot of that as well, and I know you've done several things for like Konica Minolta and MGI, and you know, samples and how you can use it, you know, is key. And I've seen a lot of Duplo, you know, a lot of your samples, Rick, too. A lot of cool stuff, and that's what gives people ideas for sure. And KURZ too. I mean, all you guys actually have. I've seen multiple things from all of you that you know, I think all understand that the key is for them to visually see what can be done. Myron, anything else that you would recommendations on marketing?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, the two things I wrote down immediately was show the samples, and, you know, samples sell. You know, these pieces are all beautiful, and, you know, that's what we've always done with the traditional foiling and embossing techniques too. You know, it's difficult to put a print advertisement out there and convey to your target audience what you're really doing. You need to see the piece in your hand. You need to touch and feel it. And so I see that as a challenge in today's world too, because of people looking, you know, on the internet electronically at things. And that's an area that I think this whole digital revolution requires too, is the ability to show off things digitally, to be able to maybe rotate them 3D to show the reflection of foils and embossed imagery or spot varnishes and those things. And there's some, you know, software packages out there to be able to do that. But I think a lot of people are going to have to look into how we can show off these pieces electronically more effectively in the future. And I know we've developed some software in that regard, and I think others are looking at that. But the simplest answer to this question is to show and display and have people touch and feel the samples. They sell themselves.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Chris, Myron, Rick, so much for spending some time with us on digital decorating today. Before we leave, I definitely want to thank all of our great sponsors for our FSA online learning experience: BOPS, Duplo, KURZ, HHS Bomber, H&M, Infinity Foils, Metal Magic, Mueller Prost, Sakurai USA, Eagle Systems, Univaco, and Universal Engraving. We really appreciate them helping us make this online experience possible. And thank you again, guys, and appreciate it. And we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.